So as humans, we have a core need, and that is to be seen, known, and loved. And so we take that a step further into just a quick statement, a reminder to all of us of how much emotions matter and how little we're taught about emotions. So feelings are much like breathing and thinking. It's something that's always happening. Feelings and emotions really influence how much we can pay attention, how great of a decision we're making. So feelings and emotion influence our decision making, our creativity, our mental and physical well-being, and our ability to form really healthy relationships, as well as our academic. And here, the purpose of this conversation is to talk about how much emotions influence our workplace performance. So let's bring this all into the business conversation. As leaders and to lead people, we have to have emotional intelligence skills. And again, I ask us all to reflect back on what have we been taught about emotions? Did we have a class that taught us about emotions like we have a class that teaches us about math and history and all the things? And I think I'm giggling because I'm thinking back about how much I would have loved that course. So that emotional intelligence, those emotional skills are not something that we're always taught. Now, nowadays, we're trying to embed that education into our earlier learning environments, but as adults, that's not really something that we've been exposed to. So we've all learned how to deal with our emotions and to cope by how our families or our upbringing, the folks that were our leaders in our lives, have taught us to cope with emotions. Let's think about this. There's been a study that has been done that has shown that employees experience 50% more inspiration when we are led by leaders with high emotional intelligence. With those leaders who have high emotional intelligence, our employees, those that we lead, have 30 to 40% less frustration. We have lower burnout rates. We have lower intent to leave the organization or leave the field that we're in. And we're also finding that the emotional skill set of us as leaders influences the ethical behavior of those that we lead, which is pretty fascinating to me. So the science, as we're learning it today through the work of Dr. Mark Brackett and through other influencers like Brene Brown, really coaches us as a leader to be thinking more of how to prevent concerns and problems rather than to intervene whenever we do have those problems arise. So if I can kind of bring it back together, I know I get excited with pulling it all together, but bringing this all back together as leaders, if we are not in tune with how we are feeling and we're not equipped or trained or comfortable in leaning into how our employees or those that we're leading are feeling, we're going to become more interventionists than we are preventionists. So we're going to take up much more of our time putting out fires than we are really thriving within our organizations. What do we do then? So I'm talking a lot about how we're not trained in emotional intelligence and what happens if we're not trained as leaders. So what do we do? And it all comes back to, again, I've mentioned Dr. Mark Brackett, and I'm also going to bring in the Be Well community here. So Dr. Mark Brackett teaches us through the ruler principles and the ruler strategies, and I'm going to talk about that here in just a minute. And in the Be Well community, what we do is we use the rate the weight approach to really stopping to check in with ourselves, which is all rooted in the subjectives units of distress. So step one is we have to pause as leaders. No longer can we lead and just say, oh, feelings don't matter here. The folks that I lead just need to do as I say because I'm the boss and things like that. How I'm feeling is going to influence how my staff is feeling. So step one is pause, and step two is really to learn how to reflect and understand how we're feeling. Asking ourselves what is going on at home with me or in the world today with COVID-19 and all of the social unrest. How's this influencing how I'm feeling? How's this influencing how I'm sleeping? Things like that. So with Rate the Weight, what we ask all of our teams to do is to rate if we're feeling anxious, we rate that. If we're feeling happy, we rate that. But first we have to pause to really check in, take a deep belly breath to give our brains the best chance to breathe, to really ask ourselves how we're thinking. So we rate that on a scale of 0 to 5. And from there, we really tune in to having a conversation about how we're feeling in the spaces that we feel safe enough to have those conversations. So again, it all comes back to stopping, pausing, checking in with ourselves. And we can offer several different resources for you all today. So we can include the Rate the Weight, a feelings wheel. An interesting find in the research is that whenever we ask all humans to describe the emotions that they feel comfortable talking through. Usually, even though there are hundreds of emotions that we could be referring to, all of us usually only refer to 3 emotions that we confidently feel like we can identify. And as leaders, it's really important to understand that, yes, we might be feeling angry, but then really the important idea is to go underneath what that anger is, to understand the root of that anger. So another resource we'd like to include is a feelings wheel. That way, if you can name anger, you can also identify what other emotions might be fueling that anger. So it's not just that Joe Smith is angry. As leaders, we really want to really tune into what might be fueling Joe Smith's anger or something like that. So that's another tool. So we're going to include today the Rate the Weight that we use in the Be Well community, the ruler strategy and principle by Dr. Mark Brackett, as well as a feelings wheel that can really help us explore emotions beyond just those 3 typical that we feel really comfortable in using. So this is the key. Again, as humans, we want to feel known, seen, and loved. And as leaders, we know that in order to lead people in our organization to the best of our ability, we have to lean into the emotions, even if we've never been taught much about the emotions. So what we're hoping to offer through the Be Well community is teaching leaders and all humans how to pause, take care of ourselves, and tune into that emotional experience that can just help us thrive in organizations. So what we hope to cover in our next conversation is really the next step. So we've talked today about the importance of pausing to check in and really be able to label how we're feeling. And then from there, we need to move into how do we take care of ourselves when we acknowledge how we're feeling. So if I'm feeling very frustrated or very overwhelmed, we need to move this conversation into what to do next, how to take care of ourselves and all the self-care strategies. So we look forward to talking about self-care in our next conversation.